The Georgia Bulldogs answered every single question that they possibly could over the last 4 weeks. We saw them against Florida. We expected them to handle Florida, but then we're like, oh, how would they handle real offenses? Missouri, Ole Miss handled no problem, particularly Ole Miss on senior night, where they looked like by far the best team in the country. And I don't care how good Alabama's looked. That performance against Ole Miss was the most impressive thing I have seen all season. But then they followed up against Tennessee, their first big road contest, their first big road contest, their only road contest against a top 25 team. Now, I will say, I don't necessarily think Tennessee's a top 25 team. They haven't beaten anybody. I think the only reason they were ranked that highly was because of their name, but it doesn't matter. It's still a hostile environment. They still haven't been tested like this since the Auburn game, which was a little scary. Obviously they needed some big plays from Brock Bowers. They didn't even really need Brock Bowers in this one. He could have rested on the sideline. He could have rested on the sideline for the rest of the season. They don't need him until the SEC championship game. It's nice to see him back out there, but they do not need him. This Georgia team, like we said, like you talked about, it seems like they got even better from playing without Brock Bowers. This offense has so many weapons. It's really outside of LSU. It might be the second best offense in the country. That might be ridiculous to say, but it's up there with the USCs, the Washingtons, the Oregons. It's up there. And then obviously defensively, I think they're ahead of those teams.
Yeah, they won't rank in the, 99th percentile among offenses for the entire year because Bobo and Beck and this offense in general, health was an issue to begin the season, but they were just figuring each other out, figuring out what Beck did well, what Bobo did well, what the offense's identity was. They had no idea. So this was always going to be a build toward November and December type of team. And I think that could be said for any team. And the same thing could be said for Alabama, where you're getting new coordinators, new quarterback. You kind of have to figure each other out, touch and feel, kind of like boxers do in the first couple rounds. You just kind of touch and feel and see, what your opponent is going to attack you and how you can attack your opponents. So I think that none of this is surprising to me. If you just look at from a talent perspective, I mean, Beck was highly recruited. Now you've got, and I keep saying it, maybe the best receiving core I've seen the Georgia Bulldogs ever have. I mean, Oscar Delp is a backup, and he would start in pretty much every other offense in the country. You've got Ra Thomas, you got Ladd McConkey, you've got a plethora of weapons. I'm telling you, Georgia's offense could arm a small nation. That's how many weapons they have. And it looks like they're playing their best ball at the right time. And that's what these great programs do. The Nick Sabans, the Kirby Smarts, that's what they do. They build forward. I say this a lot, and I didn't make this up. A better coach probably said it. One of the greatest coaches ever probably said it. I don't know who. But if you wouldn't be okay with it in a loss, you shouldn't be okay with it in a win. And I think Kirby Smart and Nick Saban exude that saying more than anybody in this country. Like, it feels like Ryan Day, he's just happy to get a win, whereas Kirby Smart is more concerned about how we won so that he can better prepare his team going forward. And I think you're seeing the fruits of that labor now that they're clicking on all cylinders, offense, defense. They're so well-rounded. If this offense was playing like this to begin the year, yeah, they would be right in the conversation with the best offense in football. I think that, it's going to take a complete football team, a complete 4 quarters to beat this Georgia Bulldogs team because they look like they're 3-time national champions as of right now where I sit.
Yeah, and everyone's going to give credit to Beck, who's just made tremendous strides, and I think looks like a guy who could go in the first round this year. I said it on Twitter. I think he's a first-round draft pick this year. I know it's a loaded quarterback class, but I'd have him ahead of Penix. I'd have him ahead of Nix. I'd have him ahead of J.J. McCarthy, without a doubt.
I don't disagree.
And then him and Jaden Daniels, it's like, pick what do you like? Do you like the dual threat guy, or do you like the more polished passer? I think that he could be a first-round pick. Now, he might stay and try to win a Heisman, win another national championship. If they win the national championship, we'll see. They still have to play Alabama and the college football playoff. But I want to really mention and give a shout-out to this offensive line of Georgia's. Their offensive line, now that they're healthy, looks like maybe the most dominant group of any group in all of football. I mean, there is no pressure. Like Carson Beck, like Tennessee got no pressure, and they have some guys that can get pressure. Ole Miss didn't get a single pressure all game. Now that they're healthy and this group's, they have first-round talent across the board. It might be the most dominant group in football. And this defense, too, is also, they allowed the big run at the beginning of the game, but to hold Tennessee to 3 points after that, they are just clicking on all cylinders. There's no weakness.
I said all that stuff about Georgia, and I do want to praise Georgia because they're a great football team. Like, very well should be the national championship favorites have they not have to face Alabama in Atlanta. Obviously, Michigan or Ohio State has better odds because they don't have to play. They have to play each other once, and that's it. But I also want to bag on Tennessee, and I want to bag on Joe Milton, that they are a bad football team. That was one of the most piss-poor performances I've ever seen. And listen, you're facing the number one team in the country. They are excellent. I'm trying to not take away anything from Georgia. I'm trying to compartmentalize my two takes. That Tennessee is a god-awful football program. Joe Milton missed so many open throws on Saturday that I was banging my head against the wall. I didn't have a dog in the fight at all, but I just couldn't believe how many times Joe Milton made the wrong decision or just couldn't execute a play. And I don't even really want to chalk it up to Heupel because I think Heupel's just working with nothing. He's working with a quarter of the talent that Kirby Smart is, and now that falls at his feet in terms of recruiting. But in terms of what was going on the field, Tennessee is no match for Georgia. I don't want those fans to ever even think about talking about another upset until they start stacking. I'm talking top 5 recruiting classes because they are not even in the same league as Georgia. I mean, they're closer to, Mississippi State than they are Georgia. That's how bad this Tennessee program is.
And it's not just Tennessee; it's the entire SEC East. It really,
the entire East is sorry.
Kentucky, Florida, Tennessee. There is not even
South Carolina
a threat to Georgia in the next 3-4 years. They will be undefeated in that division. They will not even lose a game. I'll go ahead and say that. Coming up after the break, the Falcons have a new starting quarterback, and it's a familiar face. Desmond Ridder named the starter for Week 12.